close your eyes for a moment. Not all the way, perhaps, but let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your breathing slow, and let the sounds of the room around you fade into a quiet hum. You are safe, you are warm, and the night is all around. Outside, the world has grown still. The cars have stopped their rushing, the voices have quieted, and even the wind seems to have tucked itself away for the evening. This is the time when most people sleep, when the mind begins to drift, when the edges of the day soften and blur. But it is also the time, in certain places and certain centuries, when the most luminous of minds have chosen to wake. Tonight, I want to take you back to a city that never truly slept, a city where the night was not a barrier to thought, but an invitation. I want to take you to Baghdad, in the golden age of Islam, when the lamps burned late in the courtyards, and the scholars bent over their manuscripts like gardeners tending a midnight garden. Picture it now, if you will. The year is somewhere around the middle of the 9th century, though the exact date does not matter so much as the feeling of the hour. The sun has long since set over the Tigris River, and the city of Baghdad, that great round city built by the Caliph Al-Mansur, has settled into a hush that is itself a kind of music. The streets are empty of merchants and mules. The markets are shuttered, and the only sounds that carry are the distant bark of a dog, the trickle of water in a fountain, and the occasional call of a night bird. The sky above is deep and clear, scattered with stars that seem to hang low enough to touch, and the air is cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of dust and jasmine from someone's garden. It is a night made for thinking, and in a sprawling complex near the heart of the city, a place known as the House of Wisdom or Beit al-Hikmah, the thinking is very much underway. The House of Wisdom is not a single building, but a collection of halls and libraries and study rooms, all connected by arcades and shaded courtyards where the moonlight now pools like water. Here, the Caliph has gathered the brightest minds from across the Islamic world and beyond. Persians, Greeks, Indians, Syrians, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all working together in a common language of curiosity. By day, the halls are bustling with arguments and translations and the copying of texts. But by night, something quieter happens. The daytime noise falls away, and the scholars who remain are those who find in the dark a different kind of clarity. Let us walk into one of those rooms very softly, so as not to disturb the man inside. He is seated on a cushion on the floor, his back straight but relaxed, his legs crossed, and a low table before him holds a stack of parchment, an inkwell, and a reed pen that he dips and lifts with a steady, practiced hand. The only light comes from an oil lamp at his elbow, its flame small and steady, casting a warm circle that pushes back the shadows just enough for him to see his work. The rest of the room is a soft darkness, filled with the shapes of shelves lined with scrolls and bound books, their spines catching the light like sleeping animals. The man is Mohammed ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, though we would not know that name unless we were scholars ourselves. He is a mathematician, and tonight he is wrestling with a problem that has occupied him for weeks. A problem about how to solve equations that involve squares and unknowns. A problem that will one day grow into the branch of mathematics we call algebra. But at this moment, it is just a problem on a page, and he is trying to coax its secrets out through the slow, patient work of the pen. He writes a line of characters, then pauses. He traces his finger over the symbols, mutters something under his breath, and then scratches out the line with a careful stroke. He begins again. The sound of the reed pen on parchment is a soft scratch, like a mouse in the walls, and it is the only sound in the room besides his breathing. Al-Khwarizmi is not young, not old. His beard is streaked with gray, and his eyes are tired but bright. He has been at this for hours, since before the evening prayer, and the night has wrapped itself around him like a robe. He does not notice the time passing. He does not notice the ache in his back or the dryness in his throat. He is somewhere else entirely, inside the abstract world of numbers and relationships, where the stars outside are just distant points of light that have no bearing on the elegant logic unfolding in his mind. Every so often, he sets down his pen and picks up a small wooden board covered in sand, a simple tool for quick calculations. He draws a diagram with his finger, smooths the sand with a palm, draws again. The sand absorbs the moonlight, holding the lines for a moment before he erases them with a breath. It is a humble way to work, but it suits him. He is not interested in show or prestige. He is interested in the truth hidden in the patterns, and he knows that the truth does not care about the elegance of the tool. Outside the room, down the arcade, another lamp glows. This one belongs to a different scholar, a man named Al-Kindi, who is known as the philosopher of the Arabs. His room is larger, cluttered with books and astrolabes, and strange instruments of glass and brass. Where Al-Khwarizmi works in silence, Al-Kindi works with a low stream of speech, talking to himself as he reads, arguing with the authors of the books spread open before him. Tonight he is reading a Greek text on optics, a work by a man named Euclid, and he is trying to understand how light travels, how it bends and reflects, how it enters the eye and creates the experience of seeing. He holds a small crystal up to his lamp, watching the way the light splits into colors on the wall. He murmurs, "Ah, yes, yes," as if the crystal has confirmed a suspicion he has held for weeks. He writes a note in the margin of the manuscript, his script small and precise, then walks to the window and looks out at the stars, comparing their actual positions to the predictions of the tables he has been refining. The cool air from the river drifts in, and he breathes it deeply, letting it clear his mind. These two men are not alone in their nighttime labors. Across the house of wisdom, in rooms both large and small, there are maybe a dozen other scholars awake at this hour. In one room, a translator is carefully rendering a Greek medical treatise into Arabic, pausing over every term, checking a word against a Syriac version and a Persian version, trying to find the exact shade of meaning that will preserve the ancient physician Galen's intent. In another room, an astronomer sits on a low platform in the courtyard, a quadrant in his hands, measuring the altitude of a particular star with a patience that borders on the devotional. The star is a dim one, barely visible, but its position may hold a clue about the movement of the celestial spheres. And for this astronomer, that clue is worth a night of cold fingers and stiff knees. And then there is the librarian. He is an old man, or perhaps not so old, but simply weathered by years of handling books, and his job is to keep the collection in order. By night, he does not read or write. He walks slowly through the stacks, oil lamp in hand, running his fingers along the spines of the volumes, checking that each one is in its proper place. He knows the books as a shepherd knows his sheep, by the feel of their bindings and the smell of their pages. Sometimes he pauses, pulls out a volume, and blows a thin layer of dust from its cover. He does not open it. He simply looks at the title, nods to himself, and returns it to the shelf. This is his prayer, his meditation, and he performs it every night, even when no one else is watching. What is striking about all of these scholars, as they work through the long hours between the last prayer and the first light of dawn, is the sense that they are not racing against a deadline. There is no grant proposal to submit, no tenure review to impress, no viral publication to chase. They are working because they are driven by an internal fire, a thirst for knowledge that cannot be quenched by sleep. They are working because they believe that the universe is ordered, that it is rational, and that the human mind is capable of understanding it. And they are working because they have been given the gift of a quiet night, a lamp, and the freedom to think. Of course, it is not all pure romantic idealism. There are practical pressures too. The Caliph Al-Mamun, who founded the House of Wisdom in its grandest form, has commissioned certain works, and he expects results. There are patrons to satisfy and rivals to prove wrong. But in the still of the night, those worldly concerns recede. The flame of the lamp becomes the only reality, and the page becomes the only world. Every so often, one of the scholars will set down his work and go to a small niche in the wall where a pot of date syrup sits, along with a cup of water. He will dip a piece of bread in the syrup, eat it slowly, and drink the water, feeling the sweetness spread through his tired body. Then he will return to his cushion, pick up his pen, and continue. The night is long, and the work is endless, but he does not resent it. There is a kind of peace in the repetition, in the slow progress across a page, in the feeling of a problem yielding to patient attention. And so the night wears on. The moon arcs across the sky, and the stars wheel slowly overhead. In the courtyard, a cat walks along the top of a wall, its eyes reflecting the lamplight for a moment before it leaps silently down and disappears. The astronomer on the platform shivers and wraps his cloak tighter. The translator rubs his eyes and looks at his stack of pages, half done. Al-Khwarizmi finishes a line of reasoning, sits back, and for the first time in hours, allows himself a small smile. He has found a piece of the puzzle. It is not the whole answer, not yet, but it is a step forward, and that is enough for tonight. As you lie in your own bed or sit in your own quiet room, perhaps you can feel some of that same stillness. The world is different now. The house of wisdom is long gone, its books scattered, its walls crumbled into dust. But the ideas that those scholars nurtured in the darkness have not vanished. They have traveled down the centuries, through translations and commentaries, through manuscripts and printed books, until they have reached your ears tonight. The algebra that al-Khwarizmi shaped in the lamplight is still taught in classrooms. The optics that al-Kindi puzzled over still underlies the screens you look at every day. The slow, patient work of those long nights has become part of the fabric of how we understand the world. And yet, the story of how it happened, of the nights themselves, is often forgotten. We remember the results, but we forget the wavering lamp, the scratched out lines, the small triumphs and minor frustrations of a scholar alone with his thoughts. That is what I want to share with you in these coming segments. Not just the great discoveries, but the texture of the nights in which they were made, the sound of the pen, the smell of the ink, the weight of a book in tired hands, the companionship of a cat on a wall, the slow drift of thought from one idea to another, like a boat moving across a dark river. Because history is not just a timeline of events. It is also a collection of moments, of hours spent in small rooms under the stars, of people who chose to stay awake when the rest of the world slept, because they had questions that would not let them rest. And so, if you are still listening, still drifting in that gentle space between wakefulness and sleep, let me tell you more about those long nights in Baghdad. Let me take you deeper into the house of wisdom, into the rooms where knowledge was made and remade, where the past was translated for the future, and where the quiet of the night was the perfect companion for the work of the mind. We have only just begun. The lamp is burning low, but there is still oil in the vessel. There are still pages to turn and thoughts to follow, and the night is still young. Let me tell you about a particular night, then, that I have pieced together from the fragments of letters and journals that survive. It is not a famous night. There is no great discovery recorded on this date, but it is a night that feels true, that feels like so many others, and perhaps that is why it has stayed with me. In one of the smaller chambers of the House of Wisdom, a chamber that opens onto a narrow courtyard where a single pomegranate tree grows, there is a young scholar named Yahya. He is not yet famous. His name will not appear in the histories, not in the way that al-Khwarizmi or al-Kindi will be remembered. But he is here, and he is working, and his work matters in its own small way. Yahya is a copyist. His task tonight is to produce a clean copy of a commentary on the works of Aristotle, a commentary written by a scholar from the generation before his. The original manuscript is stained with use, its margins filled with notes in 3 different hands, and the caliph's librarian has requested a fresh version, one that can be read without squinting and puzzling over abbreviations. So Yahya sits on a cushion, his back straight but not stiff, his legs crossed beneath him, and he writes. He uses a reed pen trimmed to a fine point, and he dips it into a small inkwell made of carved stone. The ink is a deep black, made from soot and gum arabic, and a little bit of something else that gives it a faint, pleasant smell, like burnt wood after rain. He writes slowly, carefully, because the speed of copying must be balanced with accuracy. A single misplaced stroke could change the meaning of a sentence, and that sentence could be read by scholars 100 years from now, and they would think that Aristotle said something he did not say. The responsibility is heavy, but Yahya does not feel it as a burden. He feels it as a kind of honor. He is a bridge, he tells himself, between the minds of the past and the minds of the future. The lamp beside him is a small clay lamp, shaped like a shallow bowl with a spout for the wick. The flame flickers now and then, and every so often Yahya pauses to adjust the wick with a pair of brass tweezers, pulling a little more of the linen thread above the rim, trimming the charred end, coaxing the flame back to a steady yellow glow. The light is warm and soft, and it casts dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that move with the breaths of the scholar. Yahya's own shadow looms large behind him, a silent companion that copies every movement of his hand. He has been at this for hours now, and his wrist is beginning to ache. He flexes his fingers, stretches them wide, and then returns to the page. The commentary he is copying is dense. It deals with Aristotle's ideas about the nature of the soul, about how the mind relates to the body, about whether thinking is a kind of motion. These are not easy ideas, and even in copying them, Yahya finds himself stopping to think. What does it mean to say that the soul is the form of the body? He is not a philosopher by training, but he cannot help pondering the words as they flow from his pen. He looks up at the pomegranate tree in the courtyard. In the dim light, he can barely make out the shape of its branches, but he knows the tree is there, its roots deep in the earth, its leaves reaching toward the sky. Perhaps the soul of the tree is its shape, its way of being a tree. Perhaps that is what the old Greek meant. He smiles at his own fancy and returns to the manuscript. The ink has dried on his page, and he continues. Line by line, page by page, the commentary grows. He is not solving any great problem tonight. He is not discovering a new planet or inventing a new branch of mathematics. He is simply preserving what others have discovered, making it legible, making it available. And that, too, is a kind of wisdom. The house of wisdom is not only a place of creation, it is also a place of preservation, a sanctuary where the voices of the past are kept alive. As he writes, he hears footsteps in the corridor outside. The steps are slow and measured, the steps of someone who is in no hurry. It is the old librarian making his rounds. The door to Yahya's room is slightly ajar, and the librarian pauses, pushes it open a little further, and peers inside. He sees the young copyist, the lamp, the pile of finished pages. He nods, a slight nod that is almost invisible in the dim light, and then he withdraws without a word. Yahya does not look up. He knows the librarian's presence, knows that it means approval, and that is enough. The night deepens. The sounds of the city have faded to almost nothing. There is no traffic, no market cries, no arguments from neighboring houses. Only the occasional bark of a dog, the distant call of a muezzin reminding the faithful that there is still time for the night prayer, and the soft scrape of Yahya's pen on the paper. The ink is glossy when it first touches the page, then sinks into the fibers and becomes matte. Yahya is aware of this transformation, aware of the way the ink and paper interact, because he has been doing this for years, and he knows the materials intimately. The paper is not the smooth, bright white paper that you might be used to today. It is a little rougher, a little darker, made from linen rags that have been beaten into pulp and pressed into sheets. It has a texture that you can feel with your fingertips, a slight grain that guides the pen. And it has a smell of old linen and the lime used in the making, a clean smell that Yahya finds comforting. He reaches the end of a section, a long passage about the relationship between perception and memory, and he sets down his pen. He leans back against the wall, which is cool against his shoulders, and he closes his eyes for a moment. He is not asleep, but he is resting, letting his mind drift. He thinks about the day that is coming, about the light that will soon seep into the sky, about the call to morning prayer that will signal the end of his work. He will sleep then for a few hours, but he knows that when he wakes, he will come back to this room, pick up his pen, and continue. The work is never truly finished. There is always another manuscript to copy, another commentary to prepare, another book to bind. And yet, he does not mind. There is a rhythm to this life, a rhythm that matches the turning of the days and the seasons. The work is the same, but the work changes with the work. Each manuscript is different. Each text brings new ideas, new questions, new puzzles. Yahya is not bored. He is engaged, not in the frantic way of a modern mind racing against a deadline, but in the slow, steady way of someone who knows that knowledge unfolds over time, that understanding cannot be rushed. He opens his eyes and looks at the page before him. The ink is dry. He picks up his pen, trims the point with a small knife, and dips it once more. The next line begins. He writes the name of Aristotle, then the beginning of a sentence about how the mind is potentially all things. The words seem to glow in the lamplight. He writes them down, and for a moment, he feels as if he is not just copying a dead philosopher's words, but participating in a conversation that has been going on for more than 1,000 years. Aristotle is here in this room, speaking through the ink, and Yahya is listening and writing and passing the words along. This is what the house of wisdom is, when you strip away the grand titles and the caliphal patronage. It is a room, a lamp, a pen, and a person who has chosen to stay awake. It is a conversation that spans centuries, conducted in whispers and margins. It is the slow, patient work of making the unknown known and the known preserved. I could tell you about other nights, other scholars. There is the night when a young astronomer named Banu Musa, one of 3 brothers who were among the most brilliant mathematicians of their age, stayed up to test a device he had built. It was a water clock, but not an ordinary one. It had gears and floats and a system of pipes that made a small bird whistle at the end of each hour. Banu Musa built it in a courtyard, and he spent the whole night adjusting the flow of water, trying to make the whistle sound exactly at the moment the shadow on a sundial matched the hour marker. His brother slept, but he did not. He just kept tinkering, listening, measuring, until the dawn light made the stars fade and the whistle sang true. Then he lay down on a bench in the courtyard, one arm over his eyes, and slept for an hour before the day's work began, or the night when a medical scholar named Al-Razi, though he would come to Baghdad later in his life, wrote in a letter about how he stayed up to observe the course of a fever in a patient. He did not have a thermometer, not as we know them, but he had his own senses. He placed his hand on the patient's forehead, noted the dryness of the skin, the speed of the pulse, the restlessness of the body. He sat by the bedside for hours, watching, waiting, writing down every change. He did not have a treatment that could cure the fever that night, but he was gathering information, building a picture of the disease, so that the next time he saw a similar case, he would know what to expect. That patient survived, by the way. Fever broke just before dawn, and Al-Razi went home and slept for a day. But I think the night of Yahya the copyist is enough for now. It is a small night, a quiet night, and it captures something of the spirit of those times. The work was not always glamorous. It was not always about genius striking like lightning. It was often about sitting down, keeping the lamp lit, and doing the work, line by line, hour by hour. And as you listen to this, perhaps you are doing your own kind of quiet work. Perhaps you are lying in bed, letting your mind wander. Perhaps you are sitting in a chair, half watching the shadows on the wall. Perhaps you are not doing anything at all, just existing in the stillness of the night. That is its own kind of wisdom. The mind needs rest. It needs darkness. It needs the freedom to drift without purpose. The scholars of the House of Wisdom understood that too. They knew that the best ideas often come in the spaces between work, when the pen is down and the lamp is low. So let your mind drift. Let the images of those long ago nights float through your thoughts. The lamp, the pen, the paper, the cat on the wall, the pomegranate tree in the courtyard, the slow turning of the stars. The scholars did not know you would be here, listening, 1,000 years later. But they would be pleased, I think, to know that their nights are remembered, that the silence they filled with thought has not been forgotten, that the work they did in the dark has come, eventually, into the light. And the night is still young. There is time yet for another story, another scene, another glance into the House of Wisdom. But perhaps it is better to stop here, to let the last image settle. Yahya the copyist is still writing. He will write until the lamp runs out of oil, and then he will trim the wick one last time, pour a little more oil from the flask, and continue. The night is long, but the work is never dull. The pen moves, the ink flows, and the past is made present. So rest now. Let the sound of my voice be like the sound of the reed on paper, a soft scratching that fades into the background. The house of wisdom is there, in the darkness of history, still glowing with a faint lamp. And you are here, in your own quiet room, listening. That is enough. That is everything. The night is a gift, and you are receiving it with grace. But if you are willing, there is one more story I would like to share before the night fully claims you. It is a story about a different kind of light, a different kind of work. And it takes place not in a copyist's room, but in a courtyard where the stars are the only ceiling. Imagine a young man named Mohammed Ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. He is not yet famous for the books he will write, not yet known as the father of algebra. Tonight, he is just a scholar with a problem. He sits on a low stool in a quiet corner of the house of wisdom's main courtyard. The moon is a thin crescent, giving just enough light to see the outlines of the arches and the fountain in the center, but not enough to read by. So he has brought a lamp, a small brass lamp with a wick that burns steadily. He has placed it on a stone block beside him, and the flame casts his shadow long and wavering against the wall. He is not copying a text tonight. He is writing his own. He is working on a book about the art of solving equations. He has been thinking about this for months, years maybe. But tonight, the idea has taken a clear shape in his mind. He wants to set down a method, a way of reasoning that anyone can follow. He wants to turn the confusion of numbers into a system, a path from the unknown to the known. He has a wooden board in his lap, a smooth slab of sandalwood that has been rubbed with oil until it shines. He uses it like a slate. He writes with a piece of burned wood, a charcoal stick, because it is easy to erase. He writes a number, then another, then an equal sign. He draws a square, then divides it into rectangles. He is thinking about how to express the idea that if you have a quantity that is unknown, you can call it simply the thing. He writes the word in Arabic, shay. Then he writes it again and again until the board is covered with small squares and lines and numbers that only he can interpret. He sets the charcoal down and stares at the board. The night is quiet except for the trickle of water in the fountain. He hears a soft sound, the rustle of a robe, and looks up. It is the librarian, a man named Saul, who also stays late. Saul nods at him, says nothing, and passes by with a book under his arm. Al-Khwarizmi returns to his board. He is trying to solve a problem about inheritance. He imagines a man who dies leaving a certain amount of money, and 3 children, and a wife, and a debt. How much does each receive? The law is clear, but the calculation is tricky. He writes the shares as fractions, then adds them, then subtracts the debt. He does this again and again, each time adjusting the numbers. He is not satisfied. He wants a method that works for any amount, not just for one example. Picks up the charcoal and writes a general statement. When you add a number to a square, and the result is equal to a root, then he stops. He is not sure how to finish. He looks at the moon. He listens to the water. And then, slowly, he begins to see the pattern. He writes the equation, x squared plus 10x equals 39. He has worked with numbers like these before, but tonight he sees them as shapes. The square is a square. The 10x is 10 rectangles attached to its sides. He can complete the square by adding a small square in the corner. He draws it. He counts the parts. The answer emerges. He does not shout. He does not jump up. He simply sets the charcoal down again and leans back and closes his eyes. The solution is there in his mind, as clear as the moonlight. Tomorrow he will write it down properly, in ink, on paper. But tonight he just lets it rest, like a seed that has broken through the soil and is now reaching for the air. He opens his eyes and looks at the lamp. The oil is low. He will need to refill it soon. But he is not done yet. He has another problem, another equation, another shape in his mind. So he takes the flask from his belt, pours a little oil into the lamp, trims the wick with his fingernails, and lights it again. The flame steadies. He picks up the charcoal. The night is still long. Now let me take you to a different part of the city, to a rooftop that overlooks the Tigris. A man named Ahmed Al-Farghani, an astronomer from a town near the river, is lying on his back on a woven mat. He has been here for hours, watching the sky. His eyes have adjusted to the dark, and he can see the faint haze of the Milky Way, the slow drift of planets, the occasional streak of a meteor. He has an astrolabe beside him, a brass instrument that gleams dully in the starlight. He picks it up and aligns it with the North Star, then measures the altitude of a bright star he knows to be in the constellation of Lyra. He writes the number on a small piece of parchment with a reed pen that he dips in a tiny inkpot carried in his sash. He is calculating the length of the year. He knows that the year is not exactly 365 days. The old Greek astronomers, Ptolemy, gave a value, but Al-Farghani is not sure it is correct. He wants to check it himself by observation. So he has chosen a particular star, one that rises just before the sun, and he has been tracking it night after night, noting the exact moment it appears. Tonight, he thinks he has enough data. He closes his eyes and runs the numbers in his head. He multiplies, subtracts, divides. The result surprises him. It is closer to 365 and a quarter, but not exactly. He will have to observe for another year, maybe 2, to be certain. But he is patient. He has the patience of the sky. He lowers the astrolabe and rests his hands on his chest. A breeze comes off the river, carrying the smell of water and mud and the faint scent of jasmine from a garden below. He listens to the sound of the city breathing, a distant donkey braying, a woman humming a lullaby from an open window, the slap of sandals on stone. He does not feel alone. The stars are company, and the sky is a ceiling he shares with every soul under heaven. He thinks about the book of the fixed stars that he is writing, a catalog of constellations with their names and descriptions. He has already drawn maps of the sky, careful illustrations on sheets of paper that he will later copy into the final manuscript. But tonight, he is just watching, letting the sky speak to him directly. He does not need to write everything down. Some knowledge is kept in the bones, in the rhythm of the breath, in the way the eyes learn to find a dim star in a sea of lights. He hears the muezzin start the call for the night prayer, the Isha, and he rises, brushes the dust from his robe, and turns toward the mosque. He will pray, then return to his mat, and watch a little longer before the dawn prayer. The night is his workshop, and the stars are his materials. Let me tell you one more, a quieter one. A translator named Hunayn ibn Ishaq is sitting in a small room that he shares with several shelves of books. He is a Christian, but he works in the House of Wisdom, translating Greek medical texts into Arabic. Tonight, he is working on a passage from Galen, a long treatise on the pulse. The sentence is complex, and the Greek word he is trying to render has no perfect equivalent in Arabic. He has a Syriac version open beside him, and a Persian version as well, but they disagree. He must decide which meaning is closest. He takes a sip of water from a clay cup. He rubs his eyes. The lamp flickers, and he adjusts the wick. He looks at the passage again. The Greek word is dynamis. It means power, capacity, potential. In medicine, it refers to the strength of the pulse, but also to the vital force that drives it. He considers using the Arabic word quwa, which means strength, but that feels too narrow. Then he thinks of the word istita'a, which means capability, but that sounds legal. He pauses. He picks up a piece of scrap paper and writes 3 possible translations. He reads them aloud softly to hear how they sound in a sentence. He chooses one, but then crosses it out and chooses another. He is not satisfied, but he knows that perfection is not possible. He will come back to it tomorrow. For now, he writes the word he has chosen, and he continues. He works like this for hours, line by line, word by word. He is a bridge, he thinks, between 2 languages, 2 worlds, 2 ways of thinking. His work is invisible, but without it, the wisdom of the Greeks would be lost, locked in a language no one in Baghdad can read. He is a keeper of keys. At some point, he hears a soft scratching at the door. It is the cat, the same gray cat that wanders the hallways of the House of Wisdom. Hunayn smiles and opens the door. The cat comes in, rubs against his leg, and settles on a pile of papers. Hunayn does not shoo it away. He strokes its back once, then returns to his work. The cat purrs, a low and steady vibration, like the sound of a distant mill. It is a companion in the silence. When the lamp begins to dim, Hunayn knows it is almost time to stop. He has translated 3 pages, maybe 4. It is not a lot, but it is enough. He puts the lid on his ink pot, cleans his pen, and arranges the papers in a stack. He picks up the cat, who does not object, and carries it to the door. He steps out into the hallway. The torches have burned down to embers. He walks to the courtyard, where the first hint of gray is showing in the east. He stands for a moment, breathing the cool air. The night is over. The day is about to begin. But for you, listener, the night can continue a little longer. You can stay in this quiet space, imagining these scenes, these lives, these lamps and pens and stars. You do not need to go anywhere. You do not need to do anything. The scholars of the House of Wisdom worked through the night, but they also knew the value of rest. They knew that the mind, like a lamp, needs to be refilled and trimmed. So let your mind rest. Let the images fade. Let the sound of my voice become like the rustle of pages, like the soft purr of a cat, like the flow of water in a fountain. There is no rush. The knowledge will still be there tomorrow. The stars will still turn. The pen will still write. And you, in your quiet room, are part of that long, slow conversation that stretches from Baghdad to your ears, across centuries and silence. So rest now. Let the night wrap around you like a soft shawl. Let the stories settle into your dreams. The house of wisdom is there, still glowing, and you are welcome to stay as long as you like. So let us stay a little longer in that lamplit world where time moves slowly and the mind is free to wander. Perhaps you remember the man we met earlier, Al-Khwarizmi, still sitting in his corner of the house of wisdom. He has not moved from his place, but he has shifted his attention. The problem of the square and the root has been set aside, at least for now. He has picked up a different piece of paper, one covered with notes about the movement of the sun and the moon. He is trying to understand the cycles of eclipses, the way the shadow of the earth falls across the face of the moon, and how to predict when the sun will be hidden by the moon's passage. He has been collecting observations from the old Greek texts, from the Indian works that have been translated into Arabic, and from his own nights of watching the sky. But he knows that the numbers do not always align. There is a discrepancy, a small but persistent error that he cannot account for. It bothers him like a grain of sand in his sandal. He puts down the paper and picks up a small tablet of wood, one that he uses for rough calculations. He dips his finger in a bowl of water and wets the surface, then uses a stylus to draw a diagram. He sketches the earth, the sun, the moon, and the lines of shadow and light. He writes numbers in the corners, then rubs them out with his thumb and writes new ones. It is a slow process, but he does not mind. The repetition is soothing, like the rhythm of a prayer. He can feel the truth somewhere in the numbers, just out of reach, but he is patient. He knows that the truth does not give itself easily. It must be coaxed like a shy animal with quiet persistence. He hears the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft and deliberate. Another scholar, perhaps, returning from the library with a scroll under his arm. Al-Khwarizmi does not look up. He is too absorbed in his diagram. But he notices the shadows shift as the lamp flickers, and he knows that the other person has stopped at his door. It is a young man, a student, who has been studying with him for a few weeks. The student is holding a piece of paper with a problem written on it. He hesitates, not wanting to disturb his teacher. Al-Khwarizmi senses the presence and looks up. He smiles, a small, tired smile. He gestures for the student to come in. The student sits down on the floor, cross-legged, and hands him the paper. Al-Khwarizmi reads it. It is a problem about inheritance, dividing a man's estate among his wife, his 3 sons, and his 2 daughters according to the laws of the Quran. The numbers are complicated, but the method is familiar. He reaches for his tablet and works through the problem step by step, explaining each step aloud in a low, calm voice. The student nods, asking a question here and there. Al-Khwarizmi answers without impatience, even though he has done this kind of problem 100 times before. He knows that for the student, it is new, and that the act of teaching is itself a form of learning. He can feel his own understanding deepen as he explains the steps, as if the knowledge is polished by being shared. They work together for maybe an hour, going through several problems. The lamp burns lower and the shadows grow longer. When the student finally leaves, Al-Khwarizmi is alone again. He turns back to his diagram of the eclipse, but now he feels a little tired, and he knows that the mind, like a field, cannot be plowed endlessly. It needs rest. He leans back against the wall, closes his eyes, and lets his thoughts drift. He imagines the sun and the moon moving in their perfect circles, the geometry of the heavens, the clockwork of the cosmos. It is a comforting thought that even when he is not watching, the stars continue their steady dance. He lets the image fade, and he lets himself float on the edge of sleep. But he does not fall asleep, not yet. He opens his eyes and picks up a small piece of clay, one that he has shaped into a rough sphere. He rolls it between his fingers, feeling the weight and the texture. He is thinking about the shape of the earth, about whether it is truly a sphere as the Greeks believed, and if so, how to calculate its circumference. He knows that a scholar named Al-Mamun, the caliph who built the House of Wisdom, once ordered a measurement of the earth's size, sending a team of astronomers to the plain of Sinjar to measure the length of 1 degree of latitude. The results had been recorded, but Al-Khwarizmi wants to verify them. He has been working on a method, using the height of a mountain and the angle of the setting sun to estimate the Earth's radius. It is a different approach, simpler, requiring only a single observation. He has not yet perfected it, but he thinks it might work. He puts the clay sphere aside and writes a note to himself on a scrap of paper. Then he stands up slowly, his joints stiff from sitting. He walks to the window and looks out. The night is still dark, but there is a hint of change in the air, a coolness that comes just before the dawn. He can see the rooftops of the city, the domes of the mosques, the palm trees swaying in the breeze. He thinks about the people sleeping in those houses, the families, the merchants, the children, the old men. They are all part of the same world, the same city, the same night. He feels a sense of connection, of belonging. He is not just a scholar working in isolation. He is part of a community, a thread in a tapestry that stretches across time. He steps back from the window and returns to his seat. He does not want to go to bed yet. He wants to savor this quiet hour before the dawn, when the world is still and the mind is clear. He picks up his pen and writes a few lines in a small notebook, a journal of his thoughts. He writes about the eclipse, about the inheritance problem, about the student's question. He writes about the feeling of the clay sphere in his hand. He writes about the sound of the wind in the palm leaves. He writes without a plan, letting the words flow like water. It is not a scholarly work. It is just his own voice, a record of a moment. And then, as if by some invisible signal, he hears the first soft note of the muezzin's call from the minaret. The voice rises, clear and pure, cutting through the silence. It is the call for the dawn prayer, the Fajr. Al-Khwarizmi puts down his pen and bows his head. He feels a sense of gratitude for the night that has passed, for the work he has done, for the knowledge he has found. He rises and goes to wash his hands and face, preparing for prayer. The night is ending, but the work will continue. And for you, listener, the night can linger a little longer, like the fading stars in the morning sky. Perhaps you would like to visit another part of the city, a place where the night is not about work, but about quiet companionship. There's a small garden tucked behind a wall with a fountain in the center. The water is still, and the only sound is the occasional drip from a leaf. A man named Abu Yusuf al-Kindi is sitting on a stone bench, reading a book by the light of a lamp. He is a philosopher, a man who thinks about the nature of existence, the soul, the intellect. Tonight, he is reading a work by Aristotle, a treatise on the soul, and he is trying to understand what it means for something to be alive. Is the soul a substance, or is it a function of the body? He does not know yet. He reads a passage, then closes the book and stares at the fountain, letting the words settle in his mind. He notices a firefly flickering in the dark. It glows, then fades, then glows again, like a thought that rises and falls. He watches it for a long time, following its path as it drifts among the flowers. He thinks about the nature of light, whether it is a substance or an accident, whether it travels or is just a state of the medium. He is not an astronomer or a physicist, but he is curious about everything. He picks up a small stone and tosses it into the fountain. The ripples spread outward, reflecting the stars, and he watches them until they fade. It is a simple pleasure, but it fills him with a kind of peace. He hears a soft voice, someone calling his name from the house. It is his wife, asking if he is coming to bed. He smiles and stands up, stretching his arms above his head. He closes the book and tucks it under his arm. He picks up the lamp and walks toward the house, his steps slow and measured. He pauses at the door to look back at the garden, the fountain, the firefly. The night has been good to him. The morning will bring more questions, more reading, more thinking. But for now, he is ready to rest. He enters the house, and the door closes behind him. And so, listener, we leave him there in the quiet of his home, and we drift back to the house of wisdom, where the lamps are burning low and the scholars are beginning to lay down their pens. The cat that Hunayn ibn Ishaq had in his room is now curled up on a pile of papers in the hallway. The air is still. The stars are fading. The city is waking. But you, in your quiet room, do not have to follow. You can stay here, in this imaginary place, for as long as you wish. The night is not a thing that needs to be ended. It is a space we can return to again and again, whenever we need a moment of calm. So let your breathing slow, let your thoughts settle, let the sound of my voice become the background hum of the house, the steady drip of the fountain, the soft scratch of a pen on paper. There is no rush. There is no deadline. There is only this moment and the gentle embrace of the night. Perhaps you will dream of the house of wisdom, of the long hallways lined with shelves of books, of the smell of ink and oil, of the sound of voices reciting poetry and discussing philosophy. Perhaps you will see Al-Khwarizmi working on his problems, Al-Farghani watching the stars, Hunain translating a difficult sentence. Perhaps you will feel the cool breath of the tigress, the warmth of the lamp, the soft fur of the cat. All of these are yours if you want them. So rest now. Let the stories settle into your heart. The scholars of Baghdad worked through the night, but they also knew the value of stillness. They knew that the deepest truths are not found by force, but by patience, by quiet attention. And you, in this moment, are practicing that same art. You are listening, waiting, letting the words sink in. That is enough. That is all that is needed. The night continues, and so does the gentle flow of telling. There is another room, perhaps, a small courtyard where a poet sits with a lute. He is not a scholar, not a scientist, but he also works through the night. He is composing a poem, a love poem, about the moon and the face of his beloved. He strums the lute softly, finding the melody that matches the words. Hums a line, then changes it, then hums again. He is not in a hurry. The poem will be finished when it is finished. The night will hold him until then. He looks up at the sky, and he sees the same stars that Al-Farghani saw, the same moon that Al-Khwarizmi calculated. But he sees them with different eyes, with the eyes of a lover. He sees the silver light on the tiles of the courtyard, the shadows of the leaves, the glint of water in a basin. He sees beauty, and he wants to capture it in words. He writes a line. The moon is a lamp in the night of your absence. He reads it aloud. It is not perfect, but it is close. He will work on it tomorrow. For now, he leans back and closes his eyes, letting the melody of the lute fade into the silence. The night has given him enough. And so, listener, we leave him there too, in the quiet of his courtyard. We leave all of them, the scholars, the poets, the dreamers, wrapped in the soft blanket of the night. And we leave you as well, in your own quiet space, with the sound of my voice fading like the last note of a lullaby. The house of wisdom still stands in the distance, its lamps still glowing, but you do not need to see it. You only need to feel its presence, like a memory, like a dream. Rest now. The night is yours. The stories are yours, and they will be here when you return. There is another room in the house of wisdom, a room where the lamps are turned low, and the only sound is the steady scratching of a reed pen on parchment. It is the scriptorium, where scribes copy manuscripts by hand, letter by letter, page by page. If you step inside, you will see a man named Abu al-Hassan, who has been copying the same book for 3 weeks. His hand is steady, his breath is even, and his eyes move slowly across the page as he transfers the words from the original to the new copy. The book is a treatise on medicine, written by a Greek physician named Galen, and it contains hundreds of pages of dense text. Abu al-Hassan does not understand all of it. He is not a doctor or a philosopher. He is a scribe, a craftsman of letters, and his job is to reproduce the text exactly, with no errors and no embellishments. He dips his pen into the ink pot, a small clay vessel filled with a dark, thick liquid made from soot and gum arabic. The ink smells of smoke and earth, a comforting scent that has become familiar to him over the years. He writes each letter with care, forming the curves and strokes with the ease of long practice. The script is clear and elegant, the lines evenly spaced, the margins neat. He works slowly, not because he is tired, but because he knows that speed is the enemy of accuracy. A single misplaced dot, a single missing letter, could change the meaning of a word, and that word could change the meaning of a sentence, and that sentence could change the meaning of a whole chapter. He cannot afford to make mistakes. The scholars who will read this manuscript, who will study it and argue over it and teach from it, depend on his precision. He pauses to rest his hand, flexing his fingers gently. The lamp beside him flickers, and he adjusts the wick, trimming it with a small pair of scissors. The light brightens for a moment, then settles into a soft, steady glow. He looks at the page he has just finished, a page of text describing the symptoms of a fever. He reads it silently, checking for errors. There are none. He nods to himself, satisfied, and turns to the next page. The work is monotonous, but there is a kind of peace in it. The repetition of the task, the rhythm of the pen, the quiet focus of the mind. It is like a meditation, a way of being present in the moment. He hears a soft sound behind him, the padding of footsteps on the stone floor. He does not turn around. He knows it is probably another scribe, or perhaps a scholar looking for a manuscript. The footsteps stop near his desk, and he looks up to see a young man, barely out of his teens, holding a stack of papers. The young man's name is Ahmed, and he is an apprentice, learning the craft of copying. He has been working in the scriptorium for only a few months, and his handwriting is still uneven, his lines wobbly, his letters too large or too small. But he is eager and patient, and he listens carefully when the older scribes offer advice. Abu al-Hassan smiles at him and gestures to a stool beside his desk. Ahmed sits down, placing his papers on his lap. He has a question about a particular word in the text he is copying, a word that appears to be misspelled. He shows Abu al-Hassan the passage, and the older man examines it closely. The word is a Greek term that has been transliterated into Arabic, and the writing is ambiguous. It could be read in two different ways, each with a different meaning. Abu al-Hassan thinks for a moment, then reaches for another manuscript, a copy of the same work that was made by a different scribe several years ago. He compares the two versions, looking for clues. The older manuscript shows the word written with a different diacritical mark, clarifying the pronunciation. Abu al-Hassan points this out to Ahmed, explaining how to recognize such ambiguities and how to resolve them. The young man nods, his face bright with understanding. He thanks Abu al-Hassan and returns to his own desk, his step lighter. Abu al-Hassan watches him go, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. Teaching is not part of his job description, but it is part of the culture of the House of Wisdom. The older scholars and scribes pass on their knowledge to the younger ones, not through formal lessons, but through daily interaction, through questions and answers, through shared work. It is a gentle, organic process, like the growth of a tree. He returns to his copying, but his mind wanders for a moment. He thinks about the book he is copying, about the Greek physician Galen, who lived hundreds of years ago in a distant land. He wonders what Galen's life was like, whether he also worked through the night, whether he also made mistakes and corrected them, whether he also felt the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He feels a kind of connection to this ancient writer, a bond forged through the act of copying. The words on the page are not just marks on parchment. They are a bridge between two minds, a conversation that spans centuries. He dips his pen again and continues writing. The night is still deep, and the work is far from finished. But he is in no hurry. The manuscript will be finished when it is finished, and the next manuscript will begin when this one ends. There is always more work to do, and that is not a burden but a comfort. It means that the house of wisdom is alive, that knowledge is being preserved and shared, that the light of learning continues to burn, one candle, one lamp, one scribe at a time. If you listen closely, you can hear the soft sounds of the scriptorium, the scratch of pens, the rustle of pages, the occasional cough or murmur of a sleepy apprentice. The air is warm and still, carrying the smell of parchment and ink and oil. The lamps cast long shadows, flickering against the walls like the ghosts of ancient scholars. It is a peaceful place, a place where time seems to slow down, where the outside world fades away, and only the text remains. And beyond the scriptorium, in another part of the building, there is a different kind of work happening. A group of scholars is gathered around a large table, studying a map of the known world. The map is drawn on a piece of vellum, colored with pigments made from minerals and plants. It shows the continents of Afro-Eurasia, the rivers and mountains, the cities and trade routes. The scholars are planning a new expedition, a journey to the Far East, to the lands of China and India. They want to gather information about the people and their customs, the animals and plants, the stars and the seasons. They are not explorers in the modern sense, not adventurers seeking glory or wealth. They are collectors of knowledge, curious about the world and its many wonders. The leader of the group is a man named Mohammed al-Makdisi, a geographer who has traveled extensively throughout the Islamic world. He is in his 40s, with a weathered face and a calm, thoughtful demeanor. He has walked from Spain to Persia, from the Sahara to the steppes of Central Asia. He has seen deserts and forests, mountains and plains, cities and villages. He has talked to merchants and nomads, farmers and princes. He has collected stories and measurements, observations and legends. Now he is sharing his knowledge with his colleagues, pointing to the map and describing the routes he has taken, the places he has seen, the dangers and wonders he has encountered. One of the younger scholars, a man named Ibrahim, asks about a particular region in Central Asia, a place called the Pamir Mountains. Al-Makdisi frowns, trying to recall the details. He has never been there himself, but he has heard stories from travelers. He describes the high passes, the cold winds, the thin air. He tells Ibrahim about the people who live there, the Wakai, who survive in the harsh environment by herding yaks and growing barley. He warns that the journey is difficult and dangerous, but that the rewards are great. The Pamirs are a crossroads of cultures, a place where the languages and traditions of Persia, India, and China meet and mix. Ibrahim listens, his eyes wide with wonder. He has never left Baghdad, has never seen a mountain or a desert. The map in front of him is a gateway to a world he can only imagine. He asks more questions, and Al-Makdisi answers patiently, drawing on his own experiences and the stories of others. The conversation continues late into the night, the lamp burning low as the scholars share their notes and their dreams. And then, as the first hints of dawn begin to color the sky, Al-Makdisi rises and leans forward, pressing his finger to a small dot on the map that marks the city of Constantinople. His colleagues lean in, their faces serious. He reminds them that this is the city of the Romans, the Eastern Roman Empire. He speaks of its great walls, its massive churches, its emperor who rules with both military might and religious authority. He explains that the scholars in Constantinople have preserved many books and traditions that were lost elsewhere, and that they are one of the last centers of the old Roman learning. He suggests that a delegation might one day visit the city to see their libraries and to exchange knowledge. Others nod, considering the idea. Such a journey would require permission from the caliph and diplomatic negotiations that could take years. But the idea is planted, and they begin to discuss how it might be done. You can almost see the flicker of excitement in their eyes, the shared sense that knowledge is not something to be guarded or hoarded, but to be gathered and shared, brought from far corners of the earth to feed the insatiable hunger of the mind. And as they talk, the map becomes more than a piece of vellum. It becomes a living thing, a tapestry of stories and possibilities, a promise that the world is vast and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. But the night is not only about grand projects and distant lands. It is also about small moments, quiet reflections, the simple act of being alive. And so we return to the courtyard where the poet sits, still cradling his lute, still searching for the perfect word. He has found a new line. Your voice is the wind that moves the leaves of my heart. He reads it again, tasting the words on his tongue. He is not sure if it is his best work, but it feels honest. It feels true. He puts down the lute and stands up, stretching. The morning is still far away, the stars still bright. He walks to the edge of the courtyard, where a small pool of water reflects the sky. He kneels and splashes water on his face, feeling the coolness against his skin. He thinks about the poem, about the beloved, about the longing that fuels his art. He knows that tomorrow he will revise, change, add, delete, shape the words until they are just right. But for now, he is satisfied. He has written something that comes from the deepest part of him, and that is enough. He sits down again, leaning against a pillar, and closes his eyes. The lute rests on his lap, silent. The night wraps around him like a blanket, soft and warm. He does not sleep, not yet. He simply rests, listening to the sounds of the night, the chirp of a cricket, the rustle of a palm frond, the distant bark of a dog. He is at peace, and perhaps you too can feel that peace. The night is a gift, a pause between the noise of the day and the demands of the coming morning. It is a time to be still, to let the mind wander, to find the quiet truth that lies beneath all our busyness. The scholars of Baghdad knew this. They understood that the night was not a time to fear, but a time to embrace. It was a time to think, to create, to connect with something larger than themselves. So let the night hold you. Let the stories of these distant scholars and poets and scribes drift through your mind like leaves on a slow river. You do not need to remember every detail. You do not need to understand every concept. You only need to be present, to let the words wash over you, to feel the calm that comes from a story well told. The house of wisdom still stands, not as a building of stone and brick, but as a place in the heart, a memory of a time when the pursuit of knowledge was a sacred act, a form of prayer. And as you close your eyes, you can imagine yourself walking through its hallways, your footsteps echoing softly on the stone floor. You can smell the paper and the ink. You can see the flicker of the lamps, the shadows dancing on the walls. You can hear the voices of the scholars, murmuring in the distance, discussing the stars, the soul, the shape of the earth. And you are welcome there. You have always been welcome. The night is yours. The stories are yours. Sleep now. Let the rest come. But the night does not end here. In the corner of a library, a different kind of work is taking place. A man named Ahmed sits alone at a low desk, surrounded by stacks of papyrus and parchment. He is a physician, a student of the human body. He has spent the evening reading a treatise by Galen, the ancient Greek doctor, trying to understand how the heart and lungs work together. Now, he is writing his own observations, based on years of visiting patients in the crowded markets and narrow alleys of Baghdad. He dips his reed pen in ink and writes slowly, carefully, forming each letter with the precision of someone who knows that a single mistake could lead to confusion or worse. His subject is the pulse. He has noticed that when a person is afraid, the pulse quickens. When they are calm, it slows. But there is more. He has seen how fever changes the rhythm, how grief can make it flutter like a bird trapped in a cage. He writes all of this down, not for fame or fortune, but because he feels a duty to pass on what he has learned. He hopes that someday someone will read his words and understand the body a little better. The lamp beside him flickers, and he pauses to trim the wick. The flame settles into a steady glow, casting long shadows across the room. Ahmed looks up, his eyes tired but not heavy. He has been working for hours, and yet he feels no desire to sleep. There is something about the quiet of the night that makes his mind sharper, more focused. He remembers a story his teacher once told him, that the prophet himself used to pray and meditate in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world was still and free from distractions. Perhaps Ahmed thinks this is why he loves the night. It is a time when nothing else demands his attention, when he can give himself fully to the work. He sets down his pen and rubs his eyes. Then he reaches for a small wooden box that sits beside the desk. Inside is a bundle of dried herbs, a gift from a merchant who traveled to India. Ahmed takes a pinch of the herb and crushes it between his fingers, inhaling the faint, earthy scent. It is said to help with concentration. He does not know if it works, but the ritual itself is soothing. He places a few leaves on the lamp, and a thin trail of smoke rises, smelling of cloves and sandalwood. The room grows even more still, as if the smoke itself is a blanket, quieting the air. He returns to his writing. He is now working on a chapter about the eyes. He describes the layers of the eye, the lens, the fluids, the way light enters and creates images. He recalls dissecting an animal earlier that year, and the memory makes him pause, a small pang of sadness passing through him. He does not enjoy the act of cutting, but he knows it is necessary. He tells himself that each small sacrifice brings knowledge, and that knowledge helps heal the living. He writes about the optic nerve, the path from eye to brain, the mystery of how we see. He admits in his notes that he does not fully understand it. No one does, but he is content with that. Some questions are meant to stay open, like doors left ajar for the next generation to push a little wider. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling the leaves of the date palms. Ahmed listens to the sound, letting it wash over him. He thinks of his family, sleeping in the house beyond the courtyard. His wife, his young daughter, his son who is just learning to read. He hopes they are dreaming peaceful dreams. He will join them soon, but not yet. Not until he has finished this paragraph, this thought, this sentence. He writes one more line about how the eye adjusts to darkness, and then he stops. It is enough for tonight. He carefully places his papers in a leather folder, tying the strings with practiced hands. He extinguishes the lamp, not with a puff of breath, but by lowering a small brass cap over the flame, letting it suffocate slowly. The room goes dark, but not completely. Moonlight filters through the high windows, casting a silver sheen on the floor. Ahmed stands and stretches, his joints cracking softly. He walks to the door, pausing for a moment to look back at the empty desk, the stacks of books, the shelves that line the walls. This place, this room, holds more of his life than any other. He whispers a quiet prayer of thanks, and then he steps out. The corridor is dim, but he knows the way by heart. He passes the scriptorium, where the scribes have long since gone home. The tables are bare, the ink pots cleaned. He passes the map room, where a single candle still burns, left by Al-Makdisi to mark his place. He does not extinguish it. Let it burn. Let the light keep the ghosts of ideas company. He reaches the courtyard and pauses. The sky is clear, filled with stars. He tilts his head back, looking up. He knows the names of many stars: Sirius, Aldebaran, the Pleiades. He knows how they move across the seasons, how sailors navigate by them, how farmers plant and harvest by their light. But tonight, he does not think about any of that. He simply lets himself feel small. It is a comforting feeling to be a tiny part of something so vast. He takes a deep breath, the air cool and clean. Then he walks to his sleeping chamber, where his family lies quiet. He slips off his outer robe and lies down on a mat near the window. He can hear his daughter's soft breathing his son's occasional murmur. He closes his eyes, and in that space between waking and sleeping, he does not think about hearts or eyes or pulses. He thinks about nothing at all. The day's work is done. Tomorrow, there will be more. But for now, there is only the stillness, the soft rhythm of breath, the gentle pull of sleep. And if you are still awake, lying in your own bed, listening to these words, you can feel that same stillness. You can let the image of Ahmed, the physician, resting after his long night, settle into your mind like a leaf falling onto still water. He is safe. His family is safe. The stars above Baghdad are the same stars you might see through your window if you look. The distance between you and him is only a matter of time, and time, in the quiet of the night, seems to soften and fold. The house of wisdom is not a place you can visit with your feet. It is a place you carry with you, a memory of a time when knowledge was a flame passed from hand to hand, never going out, never growing dim. And you too are part of that flame. Every time you learn something new, every time you ask a question, every time you pause to wonder, you add your own breath to the fire. So let the night hold you as it held Ahmed, as it held the poet, the geographer, the scribe. Let the weight of the day fall away. Let your thoughts drift like smoke from an extinguished lamp, rising and dispersing into the dark. There is nothing you need to do. There is nowhere you need to go. The morning will come when it comes. For now, you are here in this moment, wrapped in the story and the calm. The last sound you hear is the soft turning of a page. Somewhere in the distance, a scholar still writing, still thinking, still searching for the perfect word, the precise answer, the truth that glimmers like a star on the edge of impossibility. And then that sound fades too. The scholar puts down his pen. He yawns. He looks out the window at the first pale stripe of dawn, and he smiles because he knows that the night has been kind and the work has been done. And now it is your turn. Sleep truly. Let your mind wander into dreams. Let the stories settle into the corners of your memory, there to stay until you need them again. The scholars of Baghdad have done their part. The night is over, and you, dear listener, have been a perfect companion. And yet, even as you feel sleep pulling at the edges of your awareness, the night in Baghdad is not quite over. In a neighboring quarter, another light still burns. This light belongs to a man named Abu Bakr, a mathematician who specializes in geometry and the study of shapes. He is not as well known as some of his colleagues, but he is no less devoted. His room is smaller than Ahmed's, cluttered with diagrams and stacks of parchment. He has been working on a problem for 3 nights now, a problem involving the division of a circle into equal parts. It seems simple, but the more he works, the more layers he finds. He sits cross-legged on a worn cushion, a board balanced on his knees. On the board, he has drawn a circle with charcoal, and within that circle, lines intersect at various angles. He stares at it, tilting his head one way and then another. He mutters to himself, words that are half formed and half inaudible. His wife, who sleeps in the next room, has grown used to this. She knows that when Abu Bakr is deep in thought, the world around him disappears and she does not disturb him. She simply places a cup of mint tea beside his elbow before she retires, and in the morning, she finds the cup untouched and cold. Abu Bakr reaches for a small wooden compass. He adjusts its width and carefully draws another arc, connecting 2 points on the circle's edge. He measures the distance with a piece of string, marks it, and then draws another. He is trying to see if the same measure fits exactly around the circumference 6 times. It should, he knows. It is an old truth taught by the Greeks, but he wants to prove it himself, to see it with his own eyes and hands. He does not trust anything he has not tested. This is the principle of his work. Doubt, then check, then doubt again, until certainty emerges like a ship from the fog. He dips his reed pen in ink and writes a small note in the margin of his parchment. The ink is made from soot and gum arabic, and it flows smoothly onto the coarse surface. He writes in Arabic, but he also uses symbols and numbers that have traveled from India. The numerals are elegant, like small dancers frozen in mid-step. He finds them easier to work with than words when he is dealing with quantities. He writes down the length of the arc he has just drawn, and then the length of the radius, and then he calculates the ratio. It is close to 3.14, but not quite. He frowns. He knows that the true ratio is not a number that can be written down exactly. It goes on forever, never repeating, like a river that never ends. He finds this both frustrating and beautiful. He sets down his pen and rubs his temples. His eyes are tired, but his mind is still alert. He thinks about the men who came before him. Archimedes, who calculated the ratio with polygons, Euclid, who laid the foundations of geometry, Al-Khwarizmi, whose work on algebra is studied in every school. Abu Bakr feels a kinship with these men, as if they are all sitting in the same room, working on the same problem, passing notes across centuries. He sometimes imagines writing a letter to Archimedes, telling him that his work is still alive, that his ideas are still being tested and refined. He knows this is a silly fantasy, but it comforts him. He looks up at the window. The sky is still dark, but he can sense the approach of dawn. The stars are beginning to fade, one by one, as if a hand is slowly extinguishing them. He knows he should sleep soon, but he wants to finish this one proof. He picks up his pen again and writes out a series of steps, each one building on the last. His hand moves steadily, the reed scratching softly against the parchment. He reaches the final line and writes the conclusion. He leans back and reads it through. It is correct. He can feel it in his bones, that quiet satisfaction that comes when a puzzle finally clicks into place. He sets the board aside and stands up, his legs stiff from sitting too long. He walks to the window and looks out. The street is empty, the house is dark. A dog trots by, its paws padding softly on the dirt. Abu Bakr breathes in the cool air, and he feels a sense of peace. The problem is solved. Tomorrow he will write it neatly, with clean diagrams, and show it to his students. They will ask questions, and some of them will find mistakes he missed. That is good. That is how knowledge grows. He does not regret the lost sleep. He does not think of it as lost. The hours he spent on that problem were not taken from him, they were given to him, like coins in a purse that he chose to spend on something precious. He turns away from the window and walks to a small shelf where he keeps his finished works, a dozen or so bundles, each tied with a leather cord. He adds the new parchment to the pile, placing it carefully on top. Then he blows out the candle. The darkness is complete for a moment, and then the faint light of the pre-dawn sky seeps through the window, casting everything in a pale blue-gray. Abu Bakr finds his way to his bed by memory. He lies down and pulls a thin blanket over himself. He hears his wife shift in her sleep, and he smiles. He closes his eyes, but before he drifts off, his mind wanders to another thought. He thinks about the students who will come to him tomorrow. One of them, a young woman named Fatima, has shown a remarkable talent for geometry. She sees patterns where others see only lines. He wonders if she will one day surpass him, make discoveries that he never could. He hopes so. That is the point, after all, to light a torch and hand it to the next person. He smiles at the thought and lets it carry him into sleep. And you, lying in your own bed, perhaps with a book resting on your chest or a lamp still glowing beside you, can let yourself be carried by that same thought. The scholars of Baghdad did not hoard their knowledge. They shared it, taught it, wrote it down for strangers they would never meet. And you, tonight, are one of those strangers. You are receiving a gift that has traveled across more than 1,000 years. It is a quiet gift, not wrapped in gold or fanfare, but in the simple words of men and women who stayed awake when the rest of the world slept. So let your thoughts turn to them. Let them be a lullaby. Think of Abu Bakr, fitting his compass to a circle, finding order in the chaos of numbers. Think of Ahmed, describing the chambers of the heart, the paths of blood, the trick of sight. Think of the scribes who copied their words by candlelight, making sure that the flame of knowledge did not go out. Think of the poets who memorized verses by the tens of thousands, the geographers who mapped the edges of the known world, the astronomers who charted the heavens with instruments made of brass and wood and patient hands. They are all here with you in this room tonight, in a sense, not as ghosts, but as echoes. Their work has shaped the world you live in, the language you speak, the numbers you count, the books you read. You carry them with you, even when you do not know it. And when you close your eyes and let your mind drift, they drift with you into the soft, dark landscape of dreams. The sound of the city has faded. The dogs have stopped barking. The wind has settled into a gentle whisper. The last lamps have been extinguished. The house of wisdom is quiet, its rooms empty of scholars, its shelves full of waiting words. But the wisdom itself is not in the building. It is in the minds and hearts of those who seek it. And tonight, you have sought it simply by listening. There is nothing more you need to do. No chapter to finish, no problem to solve, no deadline to meet. The night is yours. You can let your eyelids grow heavy, let your breath slow, let your body sink into the mattress. You can imagine that you are lying in a courtyard in Baghdad, looking up at the same stars that Abu Bakr saw, that Ahmed saw, that the poet and the geographer and the scribe saw. The air is cool. The palm trees rustle. The world is peaceful. And as you feel sleep reaching for you, you can hear very faintly the sound of a page turning. But it is not from any book in this room. It is from a book in your own mind, a book that contains every story you have ever heard, every thought you have ever had, every dream you have ever dreamed. And that book is still being written. You are the author. You are the scribe. You are the scholar working through the night, and you are also the one who finally rests. The dawn will come. It always does. But for now, there is only the dark and the quiet and the gentle rhythm of your own heart, beating like a soft drum, marking the time until the morning. Sleep, dear listener. Sleep as they slept, with the knowledge that the work is done and the night has been kind. Good night. And perhaps, in that quiet moment, you drift not into silence, but into a different kind of wakefulness. The kind that comes when the mind, freed from the busyness of the day, begins to wander through the corridors of history. You might imagine yourself walking along a narrow street in Baghdad, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet. The moon is high, casting silver light on the walls of the houses. You pass a bakery, its ovens cold now, the smell of bread lingering faintly in the air. You pass a fountain, its water still and dark, reflecting the stars like a mirror turned toward the sky. You turn a corner and find yourself in a small courtyard. There is a scholar sitting there, an old man with a long white beard, his hands resting on a wooden staff. He is not working tonight. He is simply sitting, looking up at the stars, breathing the cool air. His name is Yusuf, and he is a historian. He has spent decades collecting stories of the prophets and the kings, the battles and the poems, the everyday lives of people long gone. Tonight, he is not writing. He is remembering. He recalls a story he heard as a child about a man who could speak to birds. He smiles at the memory, not because he believes it, but because it is beautiful. He sees you standing there and he nods, as if he has been expecting you. He does not speak. Instead, he gestures to the sky. You look up, and he points to a faint cluster of stars near the horizon. He traces a shape with his finger, a pattern that looks like a camel, but only if you tilt your head a certain way. He has been watching these stars for 70 years. He knows them like old friends. He knows which ones will rise and set with the seasons, which ones foretell the rain, which ones guide the travelers through the desert. You sit down beside him on the stone bench. The courtyard is quiet. A cricket chirps somewhere in the shadows. Yusuf closes his eyes, and you feel that he is not asleep, but somewhere else, in a place where time moves slowly. He is thinking about the first historian he ever met, a man who taught him that history is not just a record of events. It is a story we tell ourselves to understand who we are. And every generation tells it a little differently, adding new details, correcting old mistakes, forgetting some things and remembering others. He opens his eyes and looks at you. His voice is soft, like the rustling of paper. He says that the night is the best time for a historian, because in the night there are fewer distractions. The world is stripped down to its essentials: the sky, the earth, the silence. And in that silence, the past can speak more clearly. He tells you that he has heard the voices of poets who died 1,000 years ago, reciting their verses in the wind. He has seen the shadows of armies marching on the horizon. He has felt the presence of all the people who ever lived, not as ghosts, but as echoes in the fabric of the night. You nod, understanding, though you are not sure if you believe him. But belief is not the point. The point is the feeling, the quiet certainty that you are part of something larger. Yusuf stands up slowly, using his staff. He walks to the door of his small house and turns back to you. He says that you are welcome here any night, as long as you come with a quiet heart. Then he disappears inside, and you are alone in the courtyard. But you are not alone, not really. The stars are still there, and the cricket, and the scent of old stone and dry leaves. You sit for a while longer, letting the peace settle into your bones. Then you stand and walk back through the winding streets, past the empty market stalls, past the silent mosques, past the houses where families are sleeping. You find your way back to your own bed, your own room, your own pillow. And as you lie down, you feel that the night has been generous. It has given you a glimpse of another time, another life, another way of being. The scholar Abu Bakr solved his circle problem. The historian Yusuf remembered his stories. The poets and the geographers and the astronomers all did their work, and now they rest. And you too can rest with the knowledge that their work continues in you, in the quiet of your own mind, in the dreams that will come when you close your eyes. The candle is out. The window is dark. The world is still. And sleep, like a gentle hand, reaches for you, guiding you into the soft, unfathomable depth of the night. Good night.